What surprised me more than anything was seeing with my own eyes a civil war and treachery in Abkhazia, hardcore treachery. So I asked myself, what happened? Who and what has changed my people? They were different when I was leaving the country, but now they have changed. Brother against brother with a gun in his hands. This was the situation I found. Problems in Abkhazia started in the 18th century, after Russia entered Georgia, and even before. Russia immediately set up time bombs that continued ticking away through the Soviet period. Khrushchev once told Bzhavanadze, "You Georgians better behave yourselves, or else I'll set Abkhazians on you." Working on nourishing separatism was a policy-level effort. This process resumed every 10 years. It felt like a 10-year cycle. It happened in 1978 and in subsequent periods. Since 1987 and 88, Russia scaled up these processes. Abkhazia declared independence like 2 or 3 times over that period, de jure, unilaterally of course, but still. There were 3 generals supporting the separatists on the sly. Kolesnikov, who would go on to become chief of Russia's general staff, also Chindorov and Vorobyov. I had a conversation with Chindorov, and he told me point blank, "We're doing everything to topple Shevardnadze's government, because he pulled us out of Germany and abandoned us in an open field." We have no bone to pick with Abkhazians, do we? What will Abkhazians achieve without Georgians? Never trust the honesty of those saying that they want to succeed from Georgia and live in another country. It's a lie, and they themselves don't believe it. They know very well that there are just over 70 or 1,000 in Abkhazia, and in 10-15 years they will vanish, much like many ethnicities once living in the North Caucasus. A month before the war in Abkhazia, Grachev handed over the entire arsenal of the Akalsike division to Kitovani, who was in charge of our armed forces at the time. The Soviet Union had literally meant this armament to Turkey, knowing that it would be channeled to Abkhazia. This is a dangerous force. Let no one believe that it's over now and that the empire has collapsed. We have not seen the last of the empire, not yet. There are many, many difficulties ahead. A politician of this magnitude, whose key field of activity has always focused on reasoning and rational decision-making on an international level, suddenly finds himself thrust into a volcanic crater with boiling lava. And that's where he shows his unflinching determination. I arrived in Sukhumi a few days ago. Frankly, nothing beats Sukhumi in my book. This was a tragedy for the nation and its leadership. I have said repeatedly that everything depends on Russia. If we're talking about peace processes in Abkhazia, they will unfold in line with Russia's scenario. It must be rare that a man of his age travels so frequently to Ochamchira, Sukhumi, Gagra, all over the place, not just dropping by, but visiting front lines. Since the very outset until the day when we left Sukhumi, No one had so much as a shred of doubt in Mr. Shevardnadze's courage and valor. He was the first to be on the ground, disregarding our frequent objections. We did everything to limit his travels, but he kept defying us. So we just followed him around. What else could we do? Don't worry, I got your back, he would tell us.
Ваши security men, личный охранник, уже спросил вас, по крайней мере, 3-4.
Your personal security guards have repeatedly requested you to leave Sukhumi, correct?
Это так.
Yes, they have. But last time I checked, they were under my command. Unfortunately, prior to the war in Abkhazia, Shevardnadze lacked full control of the situation and the National Guard, essentially a mix of various armed groups. Shevardnadze had yet to be elected head of state. He didn't have full authority yet. There was only the Presidium of the State Council, consisting of 4 members: Shevardnadze, Sigua, Kitovani, and Iosiliani. He was forced to give consideration to the other members. Kitovani disregarded the decisions of Shevardnadze and the Presidium. Like Ardzinba, he followed instructions from the GRU, Russia's main intelligence directorate, and the goal was for the two to butt heads and start a war. Betbayev supported Gamsakhuria and Kitovani each with a truckload of weapons. In other words, Betbayev, since he gave weapons to both, had a vested interest in the parties confronting each other. There were no real political forces in the country, no consensus either. The country was torn in two. On one side, there were the Zviadist armed forces, and on the other side, there were somewhat anarchist and armed groups led by Kitovani. Everyone led his own army into the war in Abkhazia. Jaba Iosiliani and Geno Adamia, for example. Edward Shevardnadze, on the other hand, had no forces to rely on. There were battalions of volunteers that he couldn't control, order them to attack or pull back. The truth of this became more than evident in Onchamchera. It was impossible to deliver ammunition and everything else using only small barges. Transporting all of this into Zugdidi and Samegrelo in general was very hard. Equally difficult was dealing with troops transported by plane, and here's why. You take them, station them, then put them in combat formations, and while you're planning your next move, they say, "Oh, we're exhausted. Someone is coming to fill in for us." Next thing you know, they head back to Tbilisi. Irregular troops are impossible to control. I must go and see what's going on. That's it. Take care. Best case scenario, there were soldiers with experience serving in the Soviet army. We were people of authority unable to exercise this authority. Edward Shevardnadze was unable to make decisions on these issues because Kitovani was defense minister, a man who knew nothing about army affairs or patriotism. The way I saw it, when you realize that you're a third wheel weighing heavily on the shoulders of your homeland, you must resign and let others do something. Someone's shooting. Come inside. It is said that fortune favors the brave. I have no other explanation of how he survived on the front line with grenades fired at the house where he was staying with his bodyguards. With 1 to 2% chances of survival, he did survive nonetheless. God had mercy on him.
აფხაზეთში ჩამოდის რეგულარულად.
He came to Abkhazia on a regular basis throughout the most difficult period. For one, flying by helicopter was extremely dangerous because passing over the front line, it was bombarded with Grad rocket launchers and artillery cannons. We'll have a chance in the morning. They must be holding Zegardi at least. Looks like it. At some point, I realized that he had faith in divine providence protecting him. He used to tell us, don't be afraid, God is my protector, and he will protect you with me. Most likely, that's what usually happened. We spent 30 minutes visiting our positions. Then we sat down to get some rest. We were about to split into groups when we heard helicopters roar. We ducked right away. There was a meadow 10 meters away from us. Suddenly, one helicopter landed. Merab, one of our guys, yelled, "Come on, boys!" grabbed a rocket launcher and blew up the first chopper that landed. 3 people jumped out of the helicopter and took off. The rest burned inside. We didn't know how many and whose helicopters those were, but 2 eventually flew away. 15 minutes later, we were attacked with Grad rocket launchers. Some of our boys were wounded, and we're transporting them. 3 wounded soldiers. When did you leave? We arrived 30 minutes ago, transporting our wounded. Are the boys still there? Yes, the boys are still there. The military police and our detachment are still there. When we left, we had no fatal casualties, and we brought the wounded. Good job. Are you from around here?
შემოდგომა 92 წელია, ბოლნის დმანისში ძალიან დაიძაბა სიტუაცია.
The fall of 1992. The situation in Bolnisi and Dmanisi is boiling over. Problems piling up. So we set out without hesitation. A meeting is underway in the local administrative facility. We, several guards, are standing in a small reception room. Suddenly, a person in black enters with a black ribbon on his forehead, speaking in a Svanetian accent. Suddenly, he pulls his hand from the pocket, holding a grenade and showing it to us. Here's the shell and here's the ring. The ring is on the other hand. Then he says, "Let me through to Shevardnadze." Wow, how about that? One wrong move, wrong decision, and he may let go of the grenade to blow us all to smithereens. How he talked that young man into changing his mind about letting go of the grenade is a different story. Here it is. Mr. Shevardnadze approached us and asked, "What's going on here?" We told him all about it. Showing no fear, he started toward the young man, even though we tried to stop him. He just walked up to him and asked, "What do you want? Why are you here? How dare you?" The young man obviously lost his nerve. No words can describe what was happening at that time in general. Something bad could have easily happened that day, but he, in a bold move, practically neutralized that man. Let me ask you something. How are you holding up? Standing firm. Yes, standing firm you are. Hello. We're asking for help. What else did these Abkhazians want? They had everything going for them to begin with. What else did they want? Mr. Shevardnadze, why don't you give guns to us locals? I will. I'm 60 years old, but I'm much tougher than many young men. Give me a gun, man. I know you're in need. I know there's no bread or water here. We're not complaining. I know. Your visit is a big moral support for this village and everyone. Thank you. I wish you peace. There will be no peace without guns. I know, and I'm keeping my word.
Sohumshi, Achadaras rayonshi, skola.
A hospital was set up in a school building in Sohumi's district of Achadara. We were in Sohumi at the time. It was November or December. There was a big Icarus bus parked, I remember. As we entered the hospital's foyer, an explosion blasted. A rocket hit the bus with our cars nearby. That rocket, which hit the Icarus and blew it to pieces, was a calculated strike. We were really scared. Then Shevardnadze entered. Why? What are you afraid of? He asked. It's just a bomb, no big deal. We were all, 10 journalists in all, down on the ground, scared. When your clients disobey you, there's a rule. Punch in the stomach, then another on the neck, bend the clients over, cover them with your body, and take them to a safe place. That's what I did instinctively. He looked up at me and said, I'd rather have a bomb drop on me instead of you.
At
that time, everyone was watching TV or listening to the radio, or just asking, what happened? How did it happen? You call someone, and they ask you in response, how is he? What happened? Who got blown up? People dying every day. The situation was crazy. The fall of Gagra was a very painful experience, including for Shevardnadze. We were already in Sohumi. Gagra was beyond help. All forces, including both Abkhazians and separatist mercenaries, were attacking Gagra. At first, Mr. Iosiliani withdrew. Then we dispatched Gia Karkarashvili in charge of Gagra's defense. Unfortunately, it was a battle of unequal forces. Regular troops also engaged in the operation. Although there were 800 to 900 of our soldiers fighting, many were killed, including Gia's brother and others. Still, we failed to keep Gagra, and Leselidze fell too. Intel came in reporting that Gagra's population had fled to Leselidze and Gantiadi. Mr. Shevardnadze said, get the helicopter ready. I must go to Gagra. At that time, Avto Iosiliani served as Abkhazia's security minister. He rushed to stand in Shevardnadze's way and said, Mr. Shevardnadze, I'm not letting you go. We tried to stop him too, but he pushed us away and told us to our faces, I don't need your protection, and I don't need you either, and boarded the chopper. Of course, we found a dire situation in both Leselidze and Gantiadi. People with children driven out with absolutely legitimate grievances. Please don't leave us in the streets. Is there any way you can help us? I have nothing left, nothing whatsoever. Where should we women go now? I've been unable to get them out of there for 3 weeks. Please help us. They spare nobody, the older or the younger. They're committing unbelievable atrocities in Gagra. We just waited and waited. How can we live with them after all this? We are Gagra's residents too. We fled here because they're killing us there. I will go with Karkarashvili and with Datinashvili too, but I'll never go into battle with Marinashvili. He left me unprotected in Kolkhida. I was chased by a tank. That's how I got out. I've been riding their backs for 4 months. 4 months. Let them come out and talk to these people. Have they no shame at all? How can one be so conscienceless? They've killed so many and burned so many. Their sisters, brothers, and children live here. They can't just write it all off. We must deal with our common enemy first, and then, if we happen to hold a grudge against each other, then we can go killing each other. They're busy pillaging, robbing, and devastating their own people. Sheer horror is unfolding in Kobe and Martvili, and who knows what's going on in Zugdidi. It wouldn't have happened here too if the troops were not needed over there. We must protect our people on our own. We're desperate. In the evening, after we finished, we dropped by the command post. There was a crowded gathering. All service members were there too, so we decided to go back. When we arrived, Jimmy Maisuradze told us that we were prohibited from flying off. Gia Karkarashvili was defense minister at the time, and he was with us too. Gia was warned over the radio to keep 5 kilometers away from the coastline at night and 15 kilometers during the day. They suggested we relocate to Sochi, where we were promised an adequate airplane to fly to Sukhumi. He would not accept that. Why should I enter someone else's territory, then fly back from there? This was his motivation. Knowing Shevardnadze, he was always stubborn in such matters.
We took
off flying over Gagra and towards Sukhumi. Then helicopters appeared. We were excited, believing them to be our wingman helicopters, our only chance to survive. One of the choppers caught up with us and flew under our aircraft. I felt a violent jolt, and our helicopter's alarm went off. We were in serious trouble. With our helicopter spiraling out of control, we started rapidly descending into the sea. Had it not been for the courage and professionalism of our pilot, we would have crashed into the sea, and it would have been all over. Mr. Shevardnadze sat in his chair motionless, showing no emotions. Apparently, as we took off, 2 other helicopters and 2 Su fighters also left the Russian military base and followed us. As we started flying in formation, one of the Russian choppers took the place intended for our aircraft in case of the Finger 4 formation. Everything happened very fast. It's taken me longer to tell you the story than it happened in reality. Plan was to send the helicopter crashing into the water without a single bullet or rocket hole. The idea was to make it look like an accident. The pilots would not venture into flying to Sukhumi, and there was no more need to. We turned around and landed back in the Lesalidze Stadium. His skillful maneuvers to take the place to our right made it look like the 3 wingman helicopters were escorting us. It was 500 meters away from him. Otherwise, he would have gone unnoticed. So you think it was a professional pilot? Yes, an ace fighter pilot. Then we were requested to avoid trying to continue on the same route, returning and switching to an airplane instead. They pleaded with us to let them guide us back. In fact, they made us go back to the initial option after this incident. It's very hard. I've never been in a situation like this. It was a hard pill to swallow. We felt terribly insulted and humiliated. It was a most distressing, emotionally charged night. I'll never forget that night and the way Shevardnadze retained his composure in Sochi. I saw tens of people frightened, as pale as death aboard his aircraft. I also saw Shevardnadze showing no fear whatsoever. There would have been far fewer casualties and losses if there were not such panicking cowards. A coward is Georgia's worst enemy today. A peace treaty was signed in July 1993. Shortly, however, Russians launched an attack on Sukhumi. Many questioned Shevardnadze's decision, why he signed this agreement and allowed himself to be deceived. But many don't know what was happening in Sukhumi. I was there in June when they took Shroma, Kamani, and approached Sukhumi. Many don't know that Shevardnadze called a meeting and asked, how much longer can we repel attacks? The response was overwhelmingly pessimistic. Not much longer. There were just the two of us, and he asked, what do we have? What can we do? We can reinforce the stronghold, but eventually we'll have to cede it too, because we have no means, and it's impossible to bring in anything. I felt like a man seeking death. He stood there thinking for a while, and then said, you know what I want? I want a bomb to drop on me and kill me right here. I may have wished that something had happened to shake the whole world and bring it to its senses. Because at that time, we found ourselves alone in the face of a formidable force. Then he, realizing that I didn't like what he said, raised his head and told me, but you don't deserve to be dragged into it. Those are desperate moments when you wish it were all over, and that's probably very understandable. He used every means humanly possible. He appealed to the whole world, every leader he was acquainted with, everyone who respected him. It must have been a major disappointment when there was nobody to help you, provide you with military assistance, for one. As the war continued, Abkhazia was in information isolation. We were powerless against such a giant as Russia and its media outlets covering the whole world. We cried for help, but our voice was too weak to reach the world. The global public opinion of that time was not in our favor. Georgia and its leadership were left on their own. As for Western friends, Edward's mistake lay in putting too much trust in them, and many of them failed to come up to his expectations, mildly put. The world saw it as another conflict in the territory of the former Soviet Union. Yeltsin, a Democrat in Russia, will take care of it. The international community put our fate in the hands of Russia, and Russia turned against Georgia in this conflict. The threat is enormous, so I prepared a bunker for you, just in case.
Why did you decide to come to Sukhumi to defend it?
Why did you, being head of state, decide to come to Sukhumi, such a dangerous place? I promised Suhumi's residents and my people to protect the city. Leaving Sukhumi never even crossed my mind. Nor do I intend to leave now, however bad things may get. I don't think that anyone, friend or foe, doubts that he was as brave as a lion. There were many supporters of Gamsakhurdia in Abkhazia, including among our troops, and even they admitted that one thing Shevardnadze could not be accused of was cowardice. They were amazed by his courage. Most importantly, Sukhumi must survive. Sukhumi, Abkhazia, and Georgia must survive. Foreigners asked me, what does Sukhumi mean to Georgia? What would the loss of Sukhumi mean? Losing Sukhumi means the beginning of Georgia's disintegration. It's December 31st. We spruce ourselves up and head to work. Later that morning, he tells us, get the plane ready. We're heading to Sukhumi. Imagine that, flying off to Sukhumi on December 31st, spending New Year's Eve away from the family. It's 2 a.m. It's snowy, windy, and cold, and we are on our way to get intel on the Ossetians. Somewhere near Kirki, we notice a column of 3 vehicles heading from Ochamchira. I pull over and get out. Who are they? Who's brazen enough to drive with the headlights on near the front line? At that point, we didn't know that it was Shevardnadze on his way from Ochamchira to Sukhumi. He got out of the car and asked us, "Any news from the front line?" It's freezing cold, snowing all night, pitch dark, gunshots heard left and right. But he calmly asks, "What's happening? What's the situation like? How many men?" I know for a fact that he walked with the filming crew just to confirm that the Russian Defense Ministry's jet had been shot down. It was a big PR move in a way. Imagine him standing in front of a bomber on the ground. The cynical statements about Georgians allegedly painting their own aircraft and bombing their own cities are reason enough for us to set off alarm bells and warn everyone that all this does not bode well for anyone. Stop before it's too late. The message was twofold, that Georgia is capable of fighting and defeating the enemy, on one hand, and that we are being bombed by Russia's air forces, on the other. Our troops entering Sukhumi stirred discontent in Russia. Yeltsin invested a lot of effort in initiating negotiations in Moscow. Every North Caucasian leader was present. They even signed an agreement pledging to cease fire, stop the war, and establish peace in Abkhazia. Ardzinba also signed it, and so did I, of course. Earlier today, we, the heads of our 2 states, Russia and Georgia, Mr. Shevardnadze and I, signed an agreement. Later on, others followed suit, and we all pledged to put an end to this armed conflict. A ceasefire must be ensured. We will not let everything that has been said to be reduced to lip service, not worth the paper it is written on. Our efforts will focus on establishing lasting peace in our difficult region. Everyone in Georgia took it as a major victory. The war is about to be over. There will be no more bloodshed. Everyone can now feel safe. This fact, among others, proves that Georgia was not preparing for this war. Otherwise, there would have been totally different sentiments and feelings about the peace agreement. Our troops in Gagra went so far as to board barges and head to Poti en masse. Jabba Iosiliani was stationed on a hill above Gagra, observing Bichvinta and other locations from his vantage point. He came down to tell me that there is nobody left, neither Abkhazians nor Russians. The boys are taken off one by one. I've no business staying here, he said, and left. We agreed to meet each other later at the Gudauta exit or in Sukhumi. Some people blame him for signing that peace agreement, claiming that whole segments of the population returned afterward, only to find themselves trapped. But no one could foresee that or argue that it would happen for sure. That is absurd. When Russians expressed readiness to sign a peace, a ceasefire agreement, Shevardnadze had little choice but to agree. Naturally, in moments like this, you must sign any agreement on the table to replenish your supplies, regroup your troops, and so on, and use it to your advantage to grow stronger. Even if the head of state did not sign this agreement, and you can trust my insight into the military affairs of that time, we would have run out of armaments anyway in a matter of a couple of months. Our supplies of projectiles were running thinner and thinner by the day. For a while, the situation was under control, but then Russians resumed their aggression, effectively violating every agreement. Exactly 1 week later, an assault on Gagra was launched. We had just 20 boys in Gagra. The soldier on duty called me. They're attacking. We're just 20 men, and they are like 400, 500. Those were mostly Russians, of course. They seized Gagra and gradually proceeded towards Lasalidza. Help our youth at least. I'm pleading with you not to let this tragedy happen again. My only child and I are as good as dead. Mr. Shevardnadze called me in and said, let's go to Grechkovsville. Wow, that was one of the meanest places. You'd better walk fast here. The positions of Abkhazians and Russians were looking down on us. Next, there was a spot where the Gumista River flows into the sea, and there were vast, enormous tangerine orchards. We were in the most vulnerable position because we had to walk across a plain to reach our positions. I asked, Mr. Shevardnadze, why necessarily Grechkovsville? There's no visibility. Why don't we go to Shroma? You can see everything from there. I'm not here for sightseeing. I'm here to see our soldiers. No use of arguing or dissuading. He wouldn't change his mind. Wherever our positions were in need, and so much as a single bullet was fired, Edward Shevardnadze was always on the ground. How does it feel to be here, where your fate and our fate, the fates of our compatriots, are being decided as we speak? For me, this place does not feel like a front line. It doesn't feel like someone may start shooting.
I
only had one request for him. Someone, it was Baker, if I'm not mistaken, had sent American Army uniforms earlier for Mr. Shevardnadze's security guards. Looking at them, I turned to him. They're watching us through binoculars, and if they see these guys, they'll know that some major official is here. Should we undress them? No, he replied. Let some of them stay, those to be closest to you, and let me take the rest with me, I suggested. Those staying know the area better, and their uniforms are not as conspicuous. Apparently, they were made nonetheless. We arrived at our positions and met with the soldiers. Seeing Shevardnadze in trenches on Gumista, the most difficult and inaccessible place, must have meant the world to any soldier, to feel so much care and self-sacrifice.
მოშული შევარდნაძე თან საათ გუმისტაზე ყველაზე რთულ ადგილას ბუნებრივია სამხედროებისთვის ნებისმიერი ჯარისკაცისთვის ეს ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანია როდესაც ესეთ ყურადღებას და ესეთ თავგანწირვას ხედავს იმიტომ იქ მისვლა ეხლა არ იყო ადგილი
No casualties so far. Are you from Gudauta? I'm the only one from Gudauta. My neighbors, cousins, and everyone stayed there. The younger ones have made it here in one piece, but many neighbors have been killed. I want my nephews and nieces, our future generation, to live in a Georgia worth living in, to live a life full of love. What we have now in Georgia is nothing but plundering and pillaging. This is not the Georgia I had in mind and dreamed of. We are fighting here, but some are amassing wealth by marauding and robbing. What good is this wealth in the first place? I just feel sorry for the boys who are fighting. You know what? You and people like you will build a new, free Georgia. I get teary-eyed when you and your... We couldn't dissuade him, however hard we tried. Finally, we led him into a small facility with a balcony directly overlooking Abkhazian positions. We could clearly see Russians and Abkhazians walking around, also their artillery, etc. What his security guards went through was sheer torture. I asked him to put on a helmet. Why? So they won't recognize me? What was I supposed to say in response? And then he told me, "You put it on." He literally stood on the balcony, looking directly at them. There was a really big chance of something going wrong. You wouldn't believe me if I told you I saw them. They're right over there. Lying in waiting. As we started descending, they opened fire, and we were told that this was no way to leave, because about 50 meters separated our house from the next building, and that's where they were aiming. Mr. Khandrava, we must get out of here right now. They probably don't have projectiles, but they'll get them sooner or later. Then they'll blast this building, and we're toast. Nothing can save us, neither this house nor anything else. So we must get out of here while we can, I was told. Shevardnadze seconded the notion. How much longer do we have to stay here? Then he consulted the military and said, "Tell everyone we're out of here." He hated wearing a vest, giving these poor boys a hard time. The boys removed their vests and hung them over their arms, forming a wall of sorts on either side. But the vests were too short, protecting the head and body, not the legs. They are not oversized vests. As we entered this plain area, he took his time walking. I said, "Mr. Shevardnadze, maybe we should hurry up. Things don't look so good. We're all but human beings. Bullets were raining down from the sky all the while. Still, he did not hurry. Stop. Let's leave the car and walk. It's safe over there. Retaliation, revenge is not my thing. But do you really want to have a head of state with no dignity? Someone who just lowers his head when spat on? I cannot and will not be this kind of head of state or parliament speaker. I cannot and will not put up with it when someone desecrates what is sacred to you, what you cherish and have saved at the expense of sleepless nights and battles. I cannot and will not tolerate it when I am slandered and wrongfully accused of wanting to utilize the rules and methods of the communist regime. Mr. Yossi Liane just reminded us that I started the fight against negative practices. Yes, I did. But what about results, some ask? The result is that I came to believe that this society was rotten to the core. So I waged war to change that system. And if someone has done more than I have to dismantle the system and beyond, let God and let the people be the judge of that. Don't deprive Georgia of what does not belong to one man alone.
შედეგი ის იყო, რომ მე მივხვდი, რომ დაალპა ის საზოგადოება. და იმ სისტემის შეცვლისათვის ვიბრძოლე, როგორც შემეძლო, ვინ გააკეთა მეტი ეს ღმერთმა განსაჯოს და ხალხის სამართალმა განსაჯოს. იმ სისტემის დასამხობად და დასაშლელად. და ბევრი სხვა რამ კიდე. ნუ კარგავთ ამას საქართველოს. ეს ერთი კაცის საკუთრება არ არის.
ნუ რაც შემეძლო მუშაობდი პარლამენტმა
We did our best to work as parliament, but it was hard with 26 parties represented, including not only opposition members, but also those who had no problem hurling personal insults. Why do you say that? During the coup, Gamsakhurdia and Shevardnadze were of the same mind about Gorbachev. Why do you keep circulating this idea? Have you no shame? It makes me sick to my stomach. How dare you say that? I went through fire and water in Moscow. I was not in Tbilisi. Don't interrupt me. Patience, please sit down. You have your own rules and I have mine. Who warned everyone about an impeding dictatorship? Who advised the whole world to watch out? And who would not cling to power and his top position? Who was he? It was Shevardnadze. How dare you slander me? For your information, the world respects Shevardnadze in Georgia for fighting for democracy, and I will keep fighting as long as I live. What dictatorship are you talking about to begin with? I'm having tremors here. I can't take this anymore. Jaba's speech was quite malicious, but it wasn't Jaba's speech alone that triggered it all. Grievances against Shevardnadze were raised right and left, including many unfair statements. Especially uncompromising was the opposition that insisted on doing nothing but criticizing Shevardnadze. And Shevardnadze had to make a very serious decision. The situation had reached a boiling point. I've never spoken about it before, but there were people ready to cede Sukhumi just to force one person to resign. These people are still around. I know this for a fact, though I've never spoken about it. My God, have I insulted my nation by keeping these people around? I spent 12 days and nights there in Abkhazia because all this was in the making. And only after that I was forced to accept the Sochi Agreement. For 18 months I have tolerated as much as I can, except for maternal insults. When it came down to personal insults, I put up with it for a few days, but then I decided to leave. It's a done deal. I've had enough. My patience is wearing thin. Today, Shevardnadze resigns. I remember crowds flocking. I was approached by a group of intelligentsia members, Sofika Chiaureli, Guranda, and others, about 25 to 30 people. I still remember, almost hear Sofiko pounding the table. She banged her fist on the table and insisted that he return. So in her element. And she may have tipped the scales in favor of Shevardnadze's turnaround. Of course I felt upset and distressed. That step was not in character for me. But there's a limit to my patience, and I reached the limit. I conducted one interview which, unfortunately, is missing from the archives. It was recorded when the crowd kneeled, remember? He didn't like it, so he asked me to keep it to myself. He didn't like seeing his resignation stir such hype. He felt that he had overreacted, triggering what happened next. He disapproved of this episode entirely. As Georgia's and your personal spiritual father, I am entitled to bless you to address all of Georgia and state that you are Georgia's leader. Vox Dei, Vox Populi, the voice of God, the voice of the people. 1 or 2 days later, he left for Sukhumi. The tragedy of Sukhumi would take place later.